10, 13, 20, and 11. Positive state and world. I find myself in an awakening necessity to generate a stronger spiritual motivation toward the state and the world. I desire not to succumb to the aimless, meaningless nihilism that generally represents the common majority of the now fellow mankind. A commencement proceeds toward festive impure composition, a causal transcendence toward universal idealism, eternal construction of ambitious aims and ends. Perfection over helpless emotion, to fear death not as it is truly. Eventually, I arrive to a condition of absolute truth in an infinite representation of heavenly statesmanship. I recognize in my inborn, unalterable character the need to conquer, destroy, and re-irradiate what is weak, fluid, and very penetrable. I'm red and furious, pain for pleasure, as such sadism and melancholical suffering of both parts and paths of the ideological spectrum, welcome with its impending reception a satisfaction, a transformation of what once was unpleasant, and now soon will become satisfied perfection. I strive to the reconstruction of beauty within nature likewise, beauty of objectivity in general. Obsessive order and rational compulsion toward transfixion from chaos, asymmetry, and constant disharmony. I see a truthful, disapproved apperception of humanity toward my subjective abstractions from reality. Soon a gradual education to not appear timidly, soft or stupidly summons into all public scenarios. A zombified ritual toward radical discipline of movement, and principled asceticism of formative flesh. Necessity to return to the public, to the world once more. Truly, it is a grandiose monstrosity and pitiable mistake to believe that the denial of reality and of relative transactions within it, externally and phenomenally, affords a universal solution to some subjective problem or personal suffering. It could happen that, while you cry and lament internally for your deliverance and salvation from your organism, the very world surrounds you, closes in on you ever the more greatly to your sanctuary and exiled dwelling position, extracting you from such contented solace and restorative appellation. Imprisonment and rack of torture commences. The true reality of the now knowable impossibility of remaining happy or at peace with yourself in such condition. Torment and nightmare now beckons you to subject yourself to miserable and fire-imbibed death. As an a priori preliminary transfiguration of gloom, disturbance, nervous malady, and terrible hemorrhage, thus reduces you and rides to you your consequence. A subsequent eternity of pain and inevitable doom manifests your experience. Rather, simply in another case, without your external assistance to the regulation of your rightful state, empire, sovereignty, or responsive political government, the world of your state becomes unbreathable from rampant unregulated production and distribution of industrial and chemistry, abominable smog, and cancerous pollution, wherein all and every generation of your brethren afterward become more and more brutal, impious, sick, plagued, impish, feverish, and devolved, from life and health as well as from virtue and merit. Would you rejoice in your fellow humanity, never to attain to your salvation? Are you self-centered enough to permit this abolition of the will alone, to disregard carelessly the sick, poisonous welfare, the rapturous, helpless, suffering state of your fellow humanity? Nevertheless, a genuine character in this world is truly a rare occurrence. It's truly a rare occurrence. In fact, a very eminent, cultivated, and genuine man becomes less and less knowable and experienced by mankind as a particular civilization becomes ever the more late, antiquated, and befallen into ruins, dark shadows, and morose dust. Something profound occurs when two or more eminent, cultivated, and genuine men find each other in the world, acquaint themselves, and come to a more rightful understanding between each other's doctrine and philosophical principles. These gentlemen do not act out of their nature or character, their means of leisure or trivial entertainment. There is a present air of activity, ambition, motivation, and originative, fanatical idealism that circulates above their associative companionship. A degree of superiority or megalomania, to a more or less various extent, seems almost inevitable. However, it serves the purpose, mostly in the beginning of the preceding dialectic, in order to found and establish correctly, concisely, and coherently the common principles that they individually aim toward. It is now nowhere to be found the laity of the common man within their consciousness, which that lay man himself becomes more and more abundant within time manifest, more degenerate in virtue, more vicious in behavior, as the civilization regresses further into a state of sad, depressive relaxation, or superfluous, shallow optimism. Nevertheless, in regard to my own state and condition, as I have become ever the more awakened into a more livable, breathable, externally driven spirit, I cannot help but pardon myself to embrace the nature and character of strong, powerful, healthy, and valuably principled intellects, propounded and positively to be found within this world, to find them ever the more gradually, however, within an eventual achieved successiveness, whereas the truly eminent, cultivated and genuine individuals, where the quality and rightfulness of such cosmological and spiritual conditions become become real enough, ripe enough, such conditions of the world bear a plenitude of justifiable spirits. It seems therein that the intelligible nature and character of these particular spirits should truly begin a captivated procession, a capable development, sharp advancement toward a radically altered, evolved, and constituted state, that wherein I, speaking pitiably for myself, I may only rejoice in the notion that the reality of the situation in its occurrence still remains possible and positive within this lifetime, that the general nature of the world and its humanity has not ceased the positive continuation and production of eminent intellects altogether, so that regardless of my lifetime, if it in particular does not yet again experience the acquaintance or presentation of such spirituality, only should it occur more abundantly once the cycle and the wheel of the universe, seemingly by chance, but of course and always by providence, shall turn itself against the seasons and elements accordingly. There shall be seized the opportunity to commend our capability and our talent toward a healthy, beautiful, natural state, thus to seriously begin the rightful procession of the rational dialectic toward a universal, albeit material, beneficence, that did it call our name once more within the eternities and centuries of the seemingly dormant time, and soon to begin a spread throughout the vast yet relative space in composition of associative companionship, statesmanship, and positive intellect, within the various grades and degrees of privileged, responsible, and rightful mankind. October 13, 2011. 10/14/2011. Eternal universe, everlasting cycle. There seems to be two value systems in regard to certain divergent paths of morals that are affirmed or denied in consequence of time in their peculiar grades at once and absolutely, so long as one of the value systems in particular remains willed and caused, wherein such value systems conjure and supportively marry themselves together in a particular subject. The mixture appears to affirm or deny this subject only in successive moments. It is not possible to do this both at once. Therefore, to be clear, where it seems in a case that the two value systems become willed, or affirmed or denied both at once, it is that this peculiar condition is in fact rebounding and falling back to the foundation establishment of a second type of value system, that of which is slave morality, as though the two systems could seem to be conjured together and willed at once, which represents the general mark and designation of the sheer insanity and ridiculousness of this particular value system. Whereas the magnanimous man aims for a high summit and above the valley of mediocrity, the last man merely aims at the preservation of his base reality and incomprehensive delusion, never to comprehend the evolving spirit of what is magnanimous, tremendous, and gigantic in general. Nevertheless, this gigantic morality represents a transcendental idealism in relation to whatever thing that the subject knows during his waking moment. The herd morality represents a careless, indifferent realism in relation to anything that might seem successive and progressive in regard to the evolution and advancement of the things the mind and its pure ideas apprehends. In my case in particular, I find it an individual personal task and responsibility to uncover and expose the noble lie that is this delusion, namely slave morality, and to incorporate into whatever intellect a unique, new and original breath of fresh air for whatever subject of the world, as I know in conviction the reality that every human subject is of the same consciousness, that I am bound and determined to experience a life and existence in an infinite number of forms, so in an infinite number of forms, so it is credible to act in such a manner in order to attempt a triumph in the task and responsibility of developing and advancing the human race from despicability and shallowness. Everything that has come about and caused manifest in the pseudo-doctrine and ideology of the inward, penetrable, and water-infiltrated morality typical of the human race as it is recently willed, and as it is abundant in the majority of its present adherents. It is a difficult task to perform successfully, and is likely never to succeed, so long as the seasons and elements of the particular state remain as they are, in their late, final, winter-type condition and form. Though, as I feel it predictable, a coming universal disaster and near apocalyptic fall throughout the state of the West, that all subsequent sprouting countries will in like manner adopt and follow the seeds and origins of the West, unknowingly what in actuality led to its ruin, and thus it shall determine the lead and good subsequent ruin of the rest of the world through a relative succession of centuries. It still remains very possible, as matter is eternal, now that I have become ever the more convinced that salvation and spiritual annihilation of the soul may not seem possible, that the universe expands into a vast space of billions and trillions of miles, and accordingly reflects into itself, beginning a backtrace and fall, similar to so many of the complicated ideas within this world of human and divine nature in general, more than likely compressing its substance into a molecular atom of near infinite density and gravity, the Earth becoming destroyed in this process, of course, as would all of the solar system and every one of the planets, stars, galaxies, and such within the eternal universe, but through the action of the ever mysterious will of the Creator, so similar to the nature as we perceive it, which wills and represents this universe. He then summons and manifests his energy into not the creation of the universe again, but rather the rise and expansion of the eternal, in once verily compressed substance matter, and likely once again with the determination of his will, subsequently to cause once again, through a great quantity of time, the galaxies, stars, planets, nebulae, and such, and internally speaking, within the study of his great everlasting universal experiments, shall he manifest his energy and objectify himself into a living, corporeal, material, and physical form, where many of the cases, or possibly the entire majority of the cases, shall be experienced through the sensation and organism of mankind, here on this multipliable and infinitely everlasting creation theory that represents this very earth. In any event, I think that as it is perceived enough, it eventually made known and conceivable that God's world and universe generates and wills everything symbolically. The number of 4 represents every conceptual cycle throughout the world, so that the 4 seasons, the 4 elements, fire, water, air, and earth, the 4 aspects of family, father, mother, son, and daughter, respectively, and such, it is recognized that from here that the state of the West is now resided within this perfect holy circle, the winter phase, the great mother and the element of water is made very attractive to the general spirituality of the Occident. His name reigns in effect now, or rather the symbolism of the Holy Spirit, one that is exactly relative and synonymous with the element of water, dubiety, or the familial mother, or the idea of ignorance, but that is this funerary phase of the West draws in, it causes inevitable and likely enclosed hysterical chaos, calamity, and destruction, as we observe and notice otherwise in the actuality and true case of Roma, in the 5th century Anno Domini. This destruction that is inevitable to occur here, due to the relaxed, incompetent, sterile, numbered, and indifferent morality of the spirit of the Occident, in the face of very significant, dangerous problems and sufferings that occur to the detriment of the West, but now and ever the more soon to come. This destruction shall occur with lasting effects for a very long time. It is calculable with this theorem, from consulting the records of a memorable history, that where every great, magnanimous, monopolistic empire has its subsequent decline and fall, an aeon, a mysterious period of darkness, generally occurs for several centuries, as can here be observed by the example of Roma, and from late antiquity's procession and transformation into the Middle Ages. It is known that all of this transaction that takes place that will take place belongs as such to various parts of a universal cycle, one that God, the substance of this universe, rejoices throughout and loves to participate within, that the experience of a general disaster in phenomenal material civilization renders afterward a period of confusion and duality, but slowly and surely, as the general material, the community, and the knowledge of the spirit regains momentum, as the cycle transitions its phase to that of the one of the children's aspect of the four-part divine name, as in the aeon of the son or daughter commences, more than likely the daughter at once, then soon might follow the age of the son. But lastly, or during the portion of the civilization's summit, as part of one of the revolutions of the cycle, the fire symbolism of the Father, that after this mankind, as part of his particular civilization, manifests shock and astonishment at his individual, unique, original creativity, and thus enters a rather morbid, depressive, water-induced phase, in a particular representation of that of the Mother, that profound and funerary symbolism that the Occidental West has been under the sway of for seemingly in various degrees and shades throughout the whole time of Western civilization for post-antiquity, due to a certain morality system that was never yet released, erased, eliminated, or eradicated from the spiritual subjectivity of the civilization's time for various protective, law-oriented, tyrannical, and totalistic approved purposes, reasons. This moral value system that is slave morality. In any event, speaking of things so externally and materialistically, as I have earlier in another writing asserted the truth that it is beneficiary and almost necessary to participate and take rightful action within the events of this world, or of a civilization as I refer to the West, not to withdraw eternally into subjective state of solipsism or idiosyncrasy, as otherwise with humanity following such a lead, for example, all the way, which may occur if action not be taken to prevent it. Mankind within the world itself, during these perilous, dangerous times, would slip into a state of denying the totality of reality, even if this reality be mere phenomenon or a dream objectified by the will, which in fact is occurring ever the more readily, frequently, with the advancing progression of slave morality, slowly sprouting ever the more ceaselessly certain cases of narcissistic egoism, careless, indifferent nihilism, tricky, cunning thought patterns. In fact, as can be made evident to the reader in earlier writings that I've since finished, I have experienced this situation and condition of myself, that is, for sake of a pure seemingly helplessness from finding intellectual companionship. I experienced a withdrawal, and in this case a rather profound withdrawal, into various subjective realms of spatially oriented, ontologically illuminated, and existentially comprehensible patterns, totally extracted of all or any reference to the fundamental existence and principle of time, that is, or of their being affirmed or willed a validity to the past and a validity to the future, so that all my notion and conception of time reaches to that of the present only. A sad misfortune for the eminence of my intellect, consequently reduced itself in likewise proportion to the negligence of this during this time. A notion and conception of space reduced to mere existential sensation, that is, whatever object and material that was perceived through my eyes alone, in addition to whatever object or material that was felt with my hands alone, or whatever airy spirit was heard through my ears. This was all alone at this point in time, sole subsistence and existential manifestation of my very will, and nothing outside of the very sense of phenomena and impressions of matter constituted my reality, actuality, or present existence, as well as agreed the notion that all causality effective within this very small and belittled realm of mine was through and through affected solely by my command alone, my willpower, that if I were ever to act quickly enough, with the foreshadowing consequence of my grounded will subsequently be averted and erased. This last condition of things, that of my will being in command of my total causality, be it consciously or unconsciously, it is likely true and held with much validity, as is probably the case for whatever other subjective organisms, but to couple this with the stupefying thought patterns that I beheld in regard to matters of time and space, where time produced nothing but a present alone, without there being an intellectual notion or induction of a past or future, and also where space produced nothing but a present alone, without there being an intellectual notion of or induction or of potential matter outside and beyond the sensation and impression of my organism. All But this coming into actuality is dangerous and undesirable, for the various effects that are ultimately produced consist of more or less a grade or a degree of individual solipsism, and that of a hopelessly withdrawn, exiled, lost, interminated human subject and will. This actuality must be averted, especially within externally dangerous times, if whatever subject experiences this reality is to possess within him sufficient will, sufficient power in order to stop the encroaching slave driver that shall, symbolically speaking, tie him down to the rack, thus proceed to torture him endlessly and incessantly, to the point where all notion of restoration, peace, spirituality, and such become confused, diluted, delirious, or erased, due to the sheer voluminous propensity of the pain and nightmare that would become inflicted upon the subject's personal form. It cannot be denied that while it is here on this earth, a human, sober or not, or of whatever shade of character, deeply mystical or shallowly optimistic, can endure and hold long his state and condition of peace and equanimity, harmony, love for mankind, when his reality before him is so very strenuous, inflictive, damaging, and abusive to the form and flesh of his character. He simply cannot deny this. Rather, it is like holding his breath long enough under a pool of water that will soon enough generate the instinctive animal nature of his body to kick in, and to cause him eventually to diminish himself into a nightmarish, agonizing form of suffering and unjustified death. He must take steps in action to prevent this reality from taking place, in relation to his existence alone from experiencing this hellish reality, or in relation from other human beings in general, as he must evolve and participate within his world, or more truly his state, accordingly, in order to share his love and message for man, if he is to regard himself as a true follower, or true leader of his faith and value system, to construct and design the character of his world, truthfully and rightfully. This magnanimous man must externally take action in order to secure the existence of his future, to lay down before him the road and pathway necessary for his true salvation, whether he do this for an everlasting eternal happiness here upon this earth, or for such a thing as it is induced and reasoned forth by peaceful so-called annihilation, by possible though not confirmable everlasting eternal rest. October 14, 2011. Jan 20, 2011. A synopsis of Western civilization. Professed historical scholarship relative to all subjectivity within the West, a much intended necessity to behold and comprehend the life and times of the past subjects that with assurance and certainty belong to the holiness and spirit that bears their name as it has come to be known, in particular of the West. Roots of darkly submerged antiquity, distant echoes of Jericho, the Sumer, Atlantis, verily so unknown. Eventually, arrival of the fundamental foundation of Western civilization. Ancient pre-Homeric Greece. A stance of perspective commences in contrast to the Persian Achaemenid Empire. Further realization of Western perspective commences in opposition to Elder Assyria and Israel. Barbarous influences, temptation, apprehension, Hellenistic spread, growth, and germination. A further designation that the state of the West was soon becoming alive. Seleucid Empire comparisons, Asiatic Indian extensions, Eastern contact, Greco-Buddhistic concoctions, the later establishment of the Byzantine Empire, cultural diffusions, the great schism between the Eastern Orthodox and Roman Catholic Church. Looking back, perceptions of Mesopotamian origins and seeds, the Tigris and Euphrates river systems indebted influence to create an early civilization within that area in place. Agricultural revolutions before records of known time, domestications of animal type, discovery of new intuitions, warmer temperatures. The Sumer flourishes, Egyptian Nile civilization rises, unified under the Pharaoh. Phoenicia and Israelites extend relative statuses, hope and mercy of Mediterranean seas, subsequent trading between tribes and societies, eventual creation of the sailboat, long and distant navigations, a beneficent link in connection to sociable societies. Greek, Israel, Roma, permissions of the chromatic spirited north, beyond enclosed borders, within the frontiers of the known comfortable world. Bronze and iron experimentation, Kretze and Mycenaean Greek, an age of darkness, archaic age is 8th through 6th centuries before the Common Era. Before Christus, then a sprouted fertility of before Christus, then a sprouted fertility of culture within Greece's 5th and 4th centuries. Pericles, Parthenon, and Delphic temples of grandiosity. Socrates' memorable fearless execution by hemlock, and dialectical mastery of Plato's hand. Aristotelian material and scientific rational deductions. Milestone defeat, a Persian attack at Thermopylae and Marathon. Golden Ages and annihilation by conquest of pseudo-national socialistic Sparta during the Peloponnesian War. Looking back, Greco-colonial temptations begin from the 8th century archaic age. Athletic Olympic Games of epic site are in commencement. Trade flourishes enough to necessitate the implementation of monetary economies, the minting of coins, the arrival of poultry, Hippocratic oath indoctrinations, city-states at war, Athens' emergence impressively, a statue of goddess Athena, democratic experimentation, eloquence of oratory, political discernment, philosophical metaphysical inquiry, ethical subjectivity, logic, rhetoric, and aesthetics, foundation of Plato's Academy, Homeric incorporation, Alexander the Great and his insatiable, endless ambitions to conquest the far reaches of the plausible known world, tutored under Aristotle. What, am I then a bastard? Asserted jealously at his father's choice favoritism. Massive conquest and expansion of Hellenistic Greece, so far as to arrive even in India, though left alone under threat of near mutiny from fatigued soldiers. Foundation establishment of Egyptian Alexandria, among many other towns within similar appellation. Soon development of the Great Alexandrian Library. Overall, a radical excellence and superiority of origination and advancement of engineering, science, philosophy, politics, ethics, medicine. Carriage of influence over to the more austere, martially disciplined Romans. Seeds of origin from the river Tiber. Soon to become the largest empire of the ancient world, the capital centered within the Italian peninsula, shaped and transitioned gradually from monarchy toward republic, soon to an increasingly autocratic, dark, dictatorial empire, conquest through assimilation, challenge of the power of Carthage, and subsequent and subsequent defeat of such powers, Hannibal, even after issue and progression of his war elephants over the Alps into Italy, known to be one of the greatest military leaders of history. North African expansion. Supremely engineered roads soon gathered with various merchants, soldiers, citizens, slaves, formidable bridges and aqueducts, some even surviving in thorough completion to this day. The first empire to approach 1 million subjects. Monumental edifices, a Colosseum of 80,000 spectators, vast public bathhouses, shopping districts, a revered colossal political forum, objectification of Julius Caesar, and temptation to transform the Roman Republic into a grandiose monarchy. Assassination by conniving conspirators, followed anointed succession of Octavian Augustus Caesar to reign as de facto emperor from 27 before Christus until 14 after domination. Imperial successors, more or less demanding godly entitlement and enriched veneration. Originative contributions to society as government, law, war, architecture, language. Ecclesiastical Latin still remains a legacy to the Catholic Church. The classical languages themselves, the international lingua franca, continue to influence language to this very day. designation of tyrannical Nero, and subsequent transformation and alteration of Western citizenship. A vast and feverish decline of Roman order, ethics, polity, and spirit, caused probably by the successive states of construction and constitution within the governmental system. Militaristic flattery by imperators to secure the sovereign post, eventual monetary property bestowments, addiction of the Praetorian Guard, ruthless and frequent assassinations of the imperial purple, unrest within the seeds of life. Meanwhile, an increased viciousness of barbarian hordes throughout the north and in the east. The primitive ancestors of the Christian Church appear with a successive influence upon the mind of the public, the soldiers, and even the imperators. The crisis of the 3rd century, a new perspective of the reality that Roma was not as strong or powerful as it might seem. Conversion of Imperator Constantine in the 4th century, and general disfavor growing toward the positive affirmation of pagan practice in its pure belief. Soon a calamitous disorder and disarray, one after the other, barbarous invasions. Subsequent fall and declination of the once flourishing Mediterranean empire, the shades of darkness and obscurity, lasting for many centuries. Difficulty and fear of life in general soon abound. Knowledge of Greek and its many distinguished philosophers withdraw and hide from existence. Barbarians ransack cities and citizens, soon turning streets dangerous and modes of living hostile and volatile to the general public. Prosperity wilts. During this period of early medieval darkness, 6th century after domination, until more or less the 11th century, hardly a mind is eminent enough in comparison with the past antique scholars or philosophers from earlier eras. Nevertheless, with the ensuing disaster and ruinous state of the West, the eastern portion of the empire is to flourish clearly and safely for another 1,000 years. The authority and power of Western society soon fell into possession with the hand of the Church. As conversions were to become increasingly more imminent, protections of various subjects were to become invested in the seat of the papacy and clergy. Looking back, during early antiquity, in regard to the Israelites, King David and his son Solomon experienced their reigns in such power within the kingdom of Jerusalem, for the Israelites, peculiar to the nature of their time, a total rejection of polytheism was favored, as well a worship of one God alone approved, their law being foretold by the words of Moses' 10 Commandments. Destruction of the Jewish temple by Nebuchadnezzar and following exile of the spiritual leaders from Babylonia, Persia, and Greece soon commence. Judea becomes part of Roma in the 1st century before Christus, unwillingly, of course, likely owing to the folk's evident resentment of all things and ideas polytheistic, gentile, and pagan. Shortly a birth and conception of a revolutionary, radical, humanitarian Nazarene Jew, soon to represent the divine nature as destined to become the Anointed One, the Christ. Christianity begins originally as a Jewish sect during the 1st century after domination. The Christ himself was influenced from desert wanderings, a contemporary of John the Baptist, right? A persuasive teller of parables and gatherer of 12 disciples. He gave a critical admonishment of conventional morality, was driven to court and crucified by pagans. A romantic spirit in Mary's cup of blood spills forth tales of destiny and mysticism, disappearance from a tomb, resurrection of love, a customary establishment of Easter Sunday. Saint Peter and Paula, to carry the new theology, origins of the Catholic Church, Peter as the first pope, emphasis of the universality, Peter who's been Tor, who's been Sir Lancelot, who's been Orpheus, is that final? Who's been Matthew, Alexander Putnam, who's been Peter who's been Tor who's been Sir Lancelot who's been Orpheus who's been Peter, particularly so as such a line in his father. Peter as the first pope, emphasis of the universality of the new religion for you and Gentile alike, persecutions from the state, the citizens, a peculiar refusal to join in the worship of gods and imperators, tyrannical, narrow in his damnation of the stubborn Christians to the beasts, the Circus Maximus. Nevertheless, a quick growth in the size of the faith and its influence. Constantine's Edict of Milan, then ending persecutions of the Christian. Conversion to the faith himself in First Council of Nicaea subsequently establishes the empire to the new religion. The diversion of the population and wealth to the east. Establishment and foundation of Constantinople by the emperor, soon to become the capital of the Byzantine Empire, sacked by Visigoths and Vandals. The great schism between the east and the west. St. Augustine's citadel of compromise, the city of God. Collapse and fall of the Western Roman Empire. Barbarian tribes abound. Germany, Scandinavia, Saxons, Franks, Lombards. Deposition by Odoacer, the final Romulus Augustus. Collapse of literacy, organization, the gradual assertion of Christian religion over the whole of Western Europe. Reliance and dependency upon the Pope. Gregory the Great instructed the formation of the Catholic Church. St. Patrick and crossing of the Rhine to Ireland. Monks of refuge. Scholarship, cultivation, men of intellect and learning are within its darkest, most twilight age. Almost no subject outside the Catholic Church for a lengthy period of 5 centuries did possess within him the ability to read or write. Unity of Gaul by the 6th century. Restoration of rule by Byzantine Empire within Italy and Spain. Conversion of England to Christianity. Conception of Mohammed. Spiritual conquest of the Middle East. Charlemagne crowned Holy Roman Empire. Vikings began seaborne attacks, raids, conquests in England and Normandy, driven out by Alfred the Great, and an absorption into native population. Explorations of the North, Greenland, Iceland, North America, 5 centuries prior to Columbus, a period of warm temperature. 10th century Magyar invasion, Polish settlements, overall tribal fortifications, romantic, Germanic, lingual refinements. 11th century begins. Europe's truly first great age of civilization. Men of intelligence arise, and pilgrimages of piety to holy relics commence. Monolithic abbeys, Gothic cathedrals, decorations of sculpture, hangings, mosaics. Feudalism becomes dominant. Monarchs, patronage, nobility, patronage, vassals, knights, protection of serfs and peasants from barbarous invasions. A slow decline follows of this unique necessity. Last and final conversion to Christianity of pagan lands, the Baltics. Cultural significance of chivalry, knighthood, courtesy, and service. Architectural intricacy of enormous Gothic cathedrals, the virtue of St. Francis of Assisi. Epic poetry of Dante's Divine Comedy. The Church growing ever the more powerful, wealthy. Some subjects seek reform. Emphasis on poverty and spirituality. Devotion to the Virgin Mary. Procession of a cultural matriarchate. Crusades call forth to end the Holy Land's Muslim domination. Implications become divisional and resentment arises between the East and the West. Cathedral schools, universities are constructed. Encouragement of free inquiry. Philosophy and reconciliation of Plato's idealism with that of Christian dogmatism. Reintroduction of the West to the works of Aristotle. Appearance of scholasticism. Scientific observation. St. Thomas Aquinas and Summa Theologica. Irregular conflict occurs sometime between the monarch and the clergy. Existential fear of condemnation from the Church. Centralization of monarchical power throughout the remainder of the High Middle Ages. The father of English poetry, Chaucer. The Westminster Abbey. King John's sealing of the Magna Carta and the progression of common law. Late Middle Ages arrive beginning of the 14th century to 16th. Cooler temperatures, shortage of food, famines increase. Mongols invade further toward the heartland of Europa. Weakening of the papacy. 1349. The Black Plague enters, probably brought into Europa from the hordes of Mongols. Fleas and rats carriage. Significant cities lose half their population. 20 million subjects, a third of Europa deceased. The beginning of the 100 Years' War between English and French crowns. England seemingly victorious, yet with Jeanne d'Arc of France rallying from peasant status her countryman toward eventual triumph, though facing her self-execution. Coming of the Ottoman Turks of the 15th century. Fall of Constantinople to Turkish hands by 1453, with the aid of the newly invented cannon. Greek scholars flee west, subsequently contribute further to the knowledge and study of classical antiquity. The first clock installed in Milan. Growth in wealth of the middle class. Progressive abundance of population. The Renaissance of the 16th century. Revelation and appreciation of ancient Greek and Roman civilization. Cities provide patrons of the arts, a rush of activity. Inspired birth and conception of the Medici encourages artwork in painting and sculpture. Leonardo da Vinci, Michelangelo, and Raphael, sometimes rivaling and surpassing those works of antiquity. Right? The completed sculpture of Michelangelo's David by 1504. Right? The printing 1504. The printing press of Johannes Gutenberg. The principal political doctrine of Machiavelli. The humanism of Thomas More and Petrarch. Unexpected discovery of North America by Christopher Columbus. Navigation into the Indian Ocean by Vasco da Gama. Completion of Michelangelo's exuberant Sistine Chapel paintings. Hieronymus Bosch paints from north of the Alps. Cervantes' Don Quixote. Sir Thomas Malory's Le Morte d'Arthur. William Shakespeare in his English Testaments. Necessity of William Shakespeare in his English Testaments. Necessity of wealth and expansion of Spain and Portugal. Copernicus' theory of the incorrect geocentric model of the universe. Galileo and technical developments of the telescope. Renewed interest and understanding of the human anatomy. Newton's pioneer physics labors. The 16th century Protestant Reformation, born out of cause from the radical and rich excesses of the times and of the Church during the contemporary age. Martin Luther's 95 theses nailed upon the door of the Wittenberg Church. Excommunication and eventual foundation of the Lutheran Church, among others. Calvinism, Anglicanism, Puritanism, resource to the scriptures alone, rather than to works or to priestly subjects. Migration of some dissenters to North American colonies, carriage of such practical and democratic principles, thus seeds fostered the eventual conceptions of the ideology of the American colonies. The Catholic Church's counter-reformation in response, some criticisms heeded, indulgences and such, grandiose Baroque architecture and spirit embraced, seminal missions to far-off lands, visions and perceptions of national unity, war and division within the walls of the Holy Roman Empire, the 30 Years' War between the Catholics and the Protestants, revolt of the Dutch, foundation of a Protestant country, the unfortunate and storm-besieged fate of the Spanish Armada sent to conquer the Protestant England, the elevation of Elizabeth's prestige, fortification and designation of most of the North under Protestantism, and most of the Mediterranean area under Catholicism. The age of discovery and the setting forth to chart new roads and discover new worlds. Spanish colonization of North America, soon general western expansion. Ferdinand Magellan's world circumnavigation, aided by superior technology, ridden with old world diseases. Amerindians Aberdeen's defensive immunity insufficient to combat the influx of Western subjects, conversion to Catholicism, adoption of the Wayfarers' language, establishment of colonies by powers such as Swedish, Dutch, English, and French, British establishment of 13 colonies upon the Atlantic coast, a fortunate exile of Amerindians off of their once rightful lands, soon exchange of products, goods between the old world and the new world, cattle, horse, sheep toward the new, tobacco, potatoes, and bananas toward the old. West African rulers engage, are eager to trade prisoners of war, or at some points are subjects as slaves to the new world. Eventual establishment of Western colonies in the continent of Africa, Angola, Mozambique, Congo. Mystery and vagueness remains existent as to the interior of the continent. Western expansion into Asia as well. India, Persian Gulf, China, Philippines. Caribbean Persia abounds during this time. The 7 Years' War of the 1750s and 1760s between the English and the French was prior to the establishment and foundation of the American United States. Much land afterward ceded to the British, as well as to the Persians. A Dutch navigator lands in Australia during the 17th century. James Cook maps East Australia in the 18th. Overall improved economy within the West due to a rampant network of new colonies. Population growth and mortality rate decreased. Feudalism all but gone. Monarchies in the West wield much power at this time. The divine rights of kings, the king answerable only to God, thus were given the rise to absolutism. Remembrance of the Spanish and Dutch golden ages. Soon afterward, the rise of the English and French as the two greatest Western powers in the 18th century. Louis XIV, Louis XIV remains majestically and openly during this time. In the 17th century, Prussia emerges as a powerful Protestant nation. Frederick the Great reigns during this time, the 18th century, expanding his nation and defeating the Austrians many times in war. Austria reigns considerably under the Habsburg dynasty, expanding while the Ottoman Empire and the Hungarians recede. The Age of Enlightenment births and conceives, proponents of opposition to ideas of absolutism and divine monarchical sovereignty, emphasis on the equality of individuals, and understanding that the state is derived from the consent of the governed. A look to Athenian democracy in the Roman Republic, for examples of ideal inspiration. The idea of reason holds the key to forming and preserving a notion of the ideal society. Francis Bacon's senses as the key to knowing experience. René Descartes' reason to prove the existence of the world and God. Thomas Hobbes' Leviathan and social contract theory. John Locke and Rousseau examine this as well. John Locke's political foundations of libertarianism and egalitarianism. If natural rights are not secured, the citizens do have the right to overthrow their government. Voltaire's criticism of monarchy and repudiation of the church for hypocrisy and undeserving persecutions of those of differing faiths. Montesquieu's original division of government into legislative, executive, and judicial branches. Perspectives between science and religion, and their compromise advocated by David Hume. Germination of cities into rich metropolises in Paris, London, Vienna. Such artists as El Greco and Rembrandt appear. Gradual westernization of Russia. Eventually and inevitably revolution commences. British and American forces battle due to King George III's taxation necessitated from expenditures during the prior 7 Years' War. Refusal to consider the colonial grievances. Colonists take up arms. Carriage of Enlightenment ideals following visions and perceptions to create and form an ideal nation, the Declaration of Independence, and subsequent termination of the British reign. George Washington commands his army against the British forces. Defeat of the British by 1781 and a treaty declaring victory of the Americans. Subsequently becoming a newly recognized independent nation, the United States of America. An economical crisis soon emerges in France. The French are influenced by Enlightenment ideals as well, with a growing unrest within the lower ranks. The king seems tempted to consume their desires. Soon, riots, anarchy, and widespread looting break about throughout Paris, various other cities. During 1789, hordes of subjects stormed the Bastille, a prison fortress, leading the king to accept demands. Feudalism is soon abolished in a matter of hours. All nobility, clergy, provinces, and such lose their privileges. Fears of revolution throughout the West. A subsequent war with France occurs. King Louis XVI is captured and beheaded. A republic is declared, and France essentially becomes a dictatorship under the rule of the radical leaders, the Jacobin. Robespierre oversees the reign of terror. Thousands of subjects deemed disloyal and conspiratorial to the new republic are thus executed. Fortunately, Robespierre himself is captured, executed, installed an installment of power, and more moderate deputies is overtaken. Napoleon soon seizes power of the newly formed French Directory and eventually becomes emperor in 1804. Political rejection of the excesses of the turbulent times by Edmund Burke. Approval and affirmation of such nature by Thomas Paine. Early feminist philosophy of Wollstonecraft. Expansion of France during the Napoleonic Wars, though a subsequent collapse as disaster struck during the Russian campaigns of 1812. Eventually, total defeat and restoration of a French monarchy, while at the time the Holy Roman Empire, due to the wars, dissolves as well, sowing the seeds of sprout and germination of nationalism within Germany in Italy occurs during these years. France's hold on Spain falls, thus leading towards sentiments of Spanish nationalism. Britain, consequently, becomes a leading power for most of the 19th century. Illusions and traces of Enlightenment ideals continue to instate throughout the remainder of the century, leading to more revolution. Following Britain's reign of supremacy is developed a wide expansion of empire and a vast adoption of English as a mutually spoken language. The Industrial Revolution soon commences. The Industrial Revolution soon commences. The development of the steam engine. Large production of goods become developed and manufactured. As a consequence, many subjects move to cities where such products are being distributed. Population, metropolitan expansion by vast numbers. Brutal factory work ensues, around-the-clock hours, dangerous conditions, and unethical youth labor. Reforms eventually come about. Capitalism becomes the norm. Reactionary socialist movements, unions. Powerful, wealthy doctors and lawyers arise, with various industrial workers beneath. Queen Victoria reigns over the United Kingdom during the time of Pax Britannica, British peace. Universal manhood suffrage comes around. Universal manhood suffrage comes around. Enormous growth of the United Kingdom to the point that the sun never truly sets upon the walls of the empire. Acquisition of Canada, Australia, New Zealand, Hong Kong, Singapore, Egypt, the Cape of Good Hope in Africa, and India by 1870. Expansion of British settlements within these areas. Rudyard Kipling and George Orwell soon conceive. The end of Chinese isolation from the Western world. Japanese inclusion soon follows. Slavery outlawed in Britain as well as in other nations. The Dutch migrates north from South Africa into the interior of the African continent, soon becoming national heroes. Canada and Oceania and Oceania. Canada and Oceania established themselves more forcibly. The Louisiana Territory, a great portion of American land, is granted to the United States for Napoleon's France. A conquest and struggle between Texas and Mexico abounds, though with eventual success by Americans. Attraction of the Americans to the New West. The development of capital and annexing of particular territories to the American states. Eventual issue develops in question of slavery. The South secedes from the Union in response to preserving such a question of slavery. The Civil War breaks forth as Lincoln counters the secession as illegal. A skilled military is run by the Confederate South. However, soon the war rebounds in the Union's favor. General Robert E. Lee surrenders to the Union's Ulysses S. Grant in 1865. Reconstruction of the morality and ways of the South commences. Lincoln is assassinated shortly afterward. The emancipation of slavery is carried out successfully by the Republican Party. Equality and voting rights are granted to black males. Meanwhile, the Industrial Revolution spreads throughout continental Europe. Reactionary ideologies such as socialism and Marxist communism come about as such. Revolution itself, equipped toward establishing democracy within nations, is experienced. Advocation of the establishment of unified states within Germany, Italy, and such, with Prussia under the rule of King Wilhelm I and Chancellor Otto von Bismarck. An acquisition and gain of land is processed throughout Central Europe. Soon, the formation of the German Empire in 1871, the Second Reich, a radical differentiation and effulgence of culture, science, and art throughout the era of the mid-19th century. Emancipation of Catholicism through acts of parliamentary governments. New church movements are founded. A general air and atmosphere of religious inspiration proceeds through this time. On the Origin of Species is published by Charles Darwin, the theoretical formation of which the strongest do survive death. Louis Pasteur and bacteriological discoveries. Inventions of telegraphy and battery. Discovery of radioactivity. Romanticism develops. An ideological return toward nature and passion. Richard Wagner and Franz Liszt. Eugène Delacroix and Caspar David Friedrich. William Blake. William Wordsworth. John Keats. Sir Walter Scott. Lord Byron. Victor Hugo. And Johann Wolfgang Goethe. The Frankenstein of Mary Shelley. Tom Sawyer of Mark Twain. Bram Stoker's Dracula. Impressionism grows out of the realist movement. Claude Monet, Edouard Manet, Edgar Degas. Post-Impressionism develops as a consequence of Impressionism. Vincent van Gogh, Yuri Serrat, Paul Cézanne. Overall, a general quantitative accumulation, abundance and advancement of subjective creativity, art and activity. Sport and athleticism advanced during this time as well. By 1914, Western civilization seemingly dominates the entire planet. Britain, France, Germany, Italy, the United States, Russia, and Japan all form together the great nations in regard to the new imperialism. Western exploration of the interior African continent finally commences. The scramble for Africa occurs as a result. By the early 20th century, most of Africa, with the exception of Liberia and Ethiopia, becomes subsumed under the reign of imperialistic nations. The Suez Canal in Egypt begins construction. Missionaries arrive. Industrialists establish various rubber, diamond, and gold industries. In Asia, China suffers defeat from Britain's Opium War, thus subsequently comes into contact with the rest of the Western world, as well as Southeast Asia. Colonies by Britain and Germany were established at the time further in Oceania. India remains under the yoke of the British Empire and of Queen Victoria. The Middle East remains under the control of the Ottoman Empire and Persia, although the Russo-Turkish War of the late 19th century reduced the Ottoman Empire to very little remaining, which the British and French thus succeed to acquire, while the mere thought of the West regaining the Holy Land creates a fire within the Islamic world that thus contributed to the development of Islamism and their own degree of nationalism. By 1914, most territories of the world under the Western empires connected themselves by railroad and telegraph. It likewise constructed schools, churches, and factories. Antarctica was even explored, and most lands not under rule by the West often felt influence from such power. The West was transformed radically by these pioneers with their inventions of electricity, motion picture, aircraft, automobiles, petroleum, steel, which assisted greatly in the soon-to-come construction of skyscrapers, elevators, radio, telephone, laws involving the regulation of work hours and the outlaw of youth labor were put into action. Growth of cities occur like never before during this time. Settlements occur within the American West territories. Refrigeration and new technology radically improves diets. Immigration greatly increases the population of the United States due to the other extreme population growth in Europe. America by 1900 becomes the West's major industrial power, although the nation was reluctant to become involved in world events. Germany becomes the dominant power in Europe, with its army the mightiest as such in comparison. Wilhelm I proclaims himself Kaiser, after the Roman Kaiser, creates and forms the German Empire, the Second Reich, casts under his command the national leadership of Chancellor Otto von Bismarck. Church and state officially separated in France by 1900. Likewise, the economy is not as rich, though a strong sense of nationhood keeps the nation together. Britain maintains its vast and potent empire, though it falls behind in the industrial production of Germany and the United States. A progression of steps toward autonomy and independence of various British dominions, colonies, and territories. New secret alliances evolve between the nations of Germany, Italy, and Austria-Hungary. France and Russia maintain strong relations to best monetary assistances. Russia holds sympathy for the Slavic Orthodox nations of Eastern Europe. French and German relations tense as a result of the defeat of France during the Franco-Prussian War, the war that Prussia won and subsequently unified the German Empire. Britain as well falls out of isolation, joins France in an alliance at this time. The multiplicity of these alliances, coupled with a feverish competition for overseas colonies, military fortification, and sentiments of nationalism, all contribute further to the likelihood of an outbreak of World War. On July 28, 1914, the heir to the Austro-Hungarian throne, Franz Ferdinand, was assassinated by Serbian terrorists in the city of Sarajevo, at the time part of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. When Serbia refused to hand over individuals involved in the assassination, Austro-Hungary declared war, beginning World War I. General declarations of war from various nations take place at this time. It quickly fell into a stalemate as trench warfare commenced from the North Sea to Switzerland. New militaristic technologies utilized during this war: machine guns, airplanes, tanks, battleships, and submarines. The war eventually involves almost all parts of the world, resulting in a casualty amount of over 1 million subjects. The United States there since attempted to remain neutral, however increased recognition of Germany's resentment of America. Germany, as America understood through interference of telegraph, has since offered Mexico assistance if Mexico would form alliance with Germany. America then entered the war. Russia withdrew. The Tsar abdicated. The Tsar abdicated, and a petty liberal government was established, over which the communists led by Vladimir Lenin overthrew, of which Lenin became premier. in which Lenin signed a peace treaty with Germany, annexing a good portion of land to Germany. A year fight commenced. Germany subsequently surrenders. Treaties were issued after the end of the war. The Versailles Treaty, in particular, was very harsh to Germany, especially. The German Empire was thus greatly reduced in size. Poland and various Slavic countries gained their independence. Republics of Austria and Hungary were Republics of Austria and Hungary were created. Germany's Kaiser abdicated and Germany was declared a republic. Germany was forced to surrender lands to France, to assume responsibility for the atrocities that were experienced, reduce the nation's military size, and likewise pay reparations for Britain and France. The colonies of Germany throughout the world were divided between the British and French empires. Due to the incredible loss of lives during the war, many subjects within the West developed a strong disfavour for war itself. Nearly all the empires, with the exclusion of Britain and France, remained unhappy with the consequences and agreements made at the war's end. America even sensed the war to have been a mistake. Democracy did not flourish as many intended. After the war, it seems a general decline and decadence within the West truly becomes conceived. Americans thus regretted the war, found to kind of return to normalcy, and experienced economic prosperity after the time. Many subjects purchased cars, radios, various appliances. Movie theaters became abundant. A woman is granted the privilege to vote throughout the country. The stock market crashes in 1929, however, millions lose their entitlements, businesses and stores close. A severe drought destroys the livelihood of the Midwest. Franklin Delano Roosevelt is elected president and employs a series of programs to help alleviate the greater effects of the Great Depression. It is true, Europe remains relatively unstable following the post-war era. Germany itself has fallen into a state of severe financial and economical strife. Britain and France owe money to the United States. As the United States has subsumed the Depression, and so did Europe. As a result of such a kind of depressive situation led coincidentally to the generation and development of communism and fascism. Russia then intends to spread communism throughout Europe. During the post-World War I era, time saw to the establishment and foundation of the first totalitarian regimes in world history. The Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, USSR, was established first in Eastern Europe, with Italy's fascism in the West. Fascism in general is characterized by a total rejection of humanism and liberal democracy, as well as very intense nationalism, with governments headed by a single all-powerful dictator. Benito Mussolini captures the representation of Italy by appealing to many disillusioned subjects that felt that Italy was mistreated following the First World War. In 1922, Mussolini acquires power by an effective threat to lead his followers on a march toward Roma, if he were not thus to be entitled Prime Minister. In Germany, National Socialism, a kind of fascism, was becoming conceived in its various states. Devoid of humanism and comprehensive of racial theory, the party was especially intolerable of the Jews, essentially understood themselves as Germans, as a superior race. Ancient Germanic paganism and a desire to return to such was likewise a significant idea within the doctrine and principles of this party. Adolf Hitler, like Benito Mussolini, acquired power by appealing to the many disillusioned subjects that felt Germany was mistreated after the result of the First World War, likewise by using a method of intimidation toward the enemies within his rallies throughout the public domain. Eventually, by 1933, Adolf Hitler was entitled Chancellor and soon gained total dictatorial power over Germany. In opposition to the Versailles Treaty, Germany's military power was built up. The Jews within the land were likewise denied and divested of public privilege. By the late 1930s, Germany demonstrated a series of Versailles Treaty violations, although Britain or France did not act upon this. Several countries such as Austria and Czechoslovakia were annexed to Germany in order to acquire German speakers under the German yoke. Once more, Britain and France desired to avoid war at all costs. The Soviets annexed several countries to their yoke. During this time, Italy conquered Ethiopia, Japan Japan eventually invaded China. Japan eventually invaded China. By 1939, Germany invaded Poland. Ah, that country in particular was soon divided between the Soviets and Germany, and France and Britain necessarily declared war on Germany. World War II begins. Bombers are employed for the first time during this war. Warcraft machinery in general is improved. Soldiers are mostly equipped with handheld machine guns. Fleet forces are ever more mobile. Radar is invented. Germany conquers the Mediterranean, likewise France. By 1940, an alliance is formed known as the Axis powers between Germany, Italy, and Japan. Britain underwent a considerable devastation by the German forces through means of air power. The Prime Minister, Winston Churchill, counters with devastation on Germany through the means of air. Soon the Führer turns his command toward the Soviet Union, and soon by reaching his forces surrounds Moscow, Stalingrad, and Leningrad. Soon by reaching his forces surrounds Moscow, Stalingrad, and Leningrad. America early in the war was determined to remain neutral. However, the Republic feared the effects or consequences of a pacifist victory, and soon joined the Allies by at first sending weapons to Britain, China, and the Soviet Union. Japan, after the United States had seemingly blockaded some of Japan's facilitations, countered itself with attacks upon Pearl Harbor in 1941. As the United States declared war on Japan, Germany and Italy thus declared war on the United States. By 1942, Germany, Italy, and Japan ruled much of the land and territory of Western and Eastern Europe, and likewise Asia. The Holocaust supposedly commenced during this period, with the Holocaust supposedly commenced during this period, with the subsequent systematic destruction or annihilation of 11 million subjects by 1945. However, from 1943, the Allies became ever more victorious. North African liberation and Italian deposition of Mussolini, subsequent murder by his subjects. The surrender of Italy, with American, British, and Canadian troops crossing the ocean, invading the beach of Normandy, to become known as D-Day. Liberation of France, moved toward Germany. This time the Soviet Union pushed German forces back further out of the east, and of East and Central Europe. By 1945, the Western Allies and the Soviet Union invaded Germany itself and captured Berlin by Soviet forces. The Führer grows increasingly mad and desperate and commits suicide in his bunker. An unconditional surrender of Germany thus follows. Antecedent development and subsequent utilization of atomic bomb upon Nagasaki and Hiroshima, cities of Japan. What follows is as well a surrender. After the war, trials are conducted against the former Axis powers, and many subjects are executed. The United Nations is created during this period in order to prevent worldwide wars from breaking out, as well as to establish a sense of humanitarianism or egalitarianism within the policies and ethics of subjective countries. The rigging of elections develops in the East. Subsequently, all Eastern Europe and much of Central Europe falls into the hands of communist dictatorship. After the war, Germany remains under the possession of the major four Allied powers. Consequently, a decision on what to make of the nation's government wasn't to become agreed. Therefore, the nation was divided into a democratic West and a communist East, with Berlin being divided likewise between a democratic West and a communist East. The war in particular had cost millions of lives. Far exceeding any such spectacle in the past. The world's economies were gradually recovering. Allies were rejoiced at having put fascism to an end. Inevitably, a shift of power occurs wherein America and the Soviet Union become known immediately as the two worlds and superpowers, right? Colonies slowly gain independence. Mahatma Gandhi in India in relation to the British Empire, Burma in Indonesia as well, America in the Philippines, the French recognition of independence of Laos, Cambodia, Communist North Vietnam, and South Vietnam, Mesopotamian independence, Iraq, Kuwait, Jordan, Syria, and Lebanon. Conflict in Palestine as a result of massive influx of Jewish immigrants to the area during the era of the two world wars. The Zionist declaration of the State of Israel in 1948. Egypt's independence from Britain, as well as Ghana and Tunisia. Algerian independence from France. Algerian independence from France. By the 1970s, nearly all of the continent of Africa is independent from colonial rule, with the exception of a few South African colonies. A radical change in ethereal reflection upon the present state of the Western world. Most new countries attempt forms and methods of democracy, however fall soon into the hands of dictatorship. From the end of the Second World War until 1991, the state of the West and its politics is bound up and determined by the tension and fear generated between the only two world superpowers, the United States and the Soviet Union. The Berlin Wall is constructed soon to represent the state of the Cold War throughout the world. Right? Communist parties are established in nations such as Italy and France. The widespread fear that the whole of Europe would become communist. Response of the United States with the Marshall Plan, the determined reconstruction of Europe, and sharing of money. Success and prosperity is redeemed. The German and Italian citizens are joys of the states, regrettable of their fascist history. The North Atlantic Treaty Organization is signed by a multitude of Western European countries in 1949, with the Warsaw Pact being signed by much of Eastern Europe. These treaties binding themselves to protect themselves, respectively, if ever under fear of attack. China becomes communist. Yes, China becomes communist. Japan becomes democratic. Conflict of communist North Korea and non-communist South Korea. The world living in fear of World War III during the Cold War, at any moment occurring. Seemingly any strife occurring between communism and democracy would inevitably lead to conflict, an absolute one at that. With the threat of nuclear annihilation, right? An eventual development of atomic weaponry, enough to destroy the world several times over, right? The Cuban Missile Crisis of the 1950s, and near the brink of war between the two powers, the Vietnam War in the 1960s and 1970s, with American temptation to avert the process of South Vietnam from becoming communist like the North. Despite the superiority of technology and weaponry, the war seems to possess no sign of ending, and a gradual movement within the West calls for the end of the country's involvement in the war. Soon all American troops are withdrawn. The South falls to the North, and Laos and Cambodia likewise fall into the hands of communism. A Soviet invasion of Afghanistan in 1979, Muslim arrival from around the world, in order to attempt to save the nation from communist conquest, right? A jihad of 10 years. Upon exile of the communists, Afghanistan falls into civil war, with the Taliban overtaking much of the country. A lessening of tension over time, the tent, right? Ronald Reagan, as President of the United States, seeking to outproduce the capital of the Soviet Union in military production and technology. By 1985, Mikhail Gorbachev summons power in the East. Knowing the inevitable futility of competing any further with the United States, the implementation of reform occurs, granting citizens freedom of speech and a number of capitalist reforms. Negotiation of treaties between the two powers occur. The imposition of communism upon Eastern Europe subsequently ends. Poland's round table talks, the semi-free elections of 1989, anti-communist candidates win a striking victory, sparking a series of peaceful anti-communist revolutions. soon inevitable collapse of communist regimes throughout Europe. Reagan calls for Gorbachev to tear down the Berlin Wall. It happens, and East Germany's communism is voted out, united with the West once more. The Soviet legislature votes to abolish the Soviet Union in 1991. A plethora of republics under division: Russia, Ukraine, Kazakhstan. Soon the West and Europe as a whole finally free from communism. The United States becomes the world's only superpower. The United States becomes the world's only superpower. Perceptions of unprecedented prosperity eventually arrive throughout the West. Global trade, capitalism, free trade agreements, an economy of service, information, good relations, introduction of the euro dollar, although various internal sufferings, introduction of the euro coin, right? Introduction of the euro coin, right? Although various internal sufferings, introduction of the euro coin, right? Although various internal sufferings and difficult conditions take shape, the terrorist attacks on September 11, 2001, the occupation of Iraq, and deposition of Saddam Hussein, the successive resentments of the Arab world toward the West following the Second World War, the global financial crisis of 2008, there seems to remain much promise, hope, and faith toward an eventual revelation of the entirety of Western history. Its construction is the entirety of Western history, the entirety of their history, right? The entirety of Western history. Its construction, subsistence, and civilization. A gradual though benevolent erosion and annihilation of all once positively progressed and of all since achieved. October 20, 2011.